A baby slept with 3 puppies. And when the world saw why, it broke everyone's heart. It started on the coldest night of winter. No heat, no power, just a desperate mother and her freezing baby. But when she laid him beside those tiny pups to keep him alive, someone snapped a photo. By morning, that picture had exploded online, turning a mother's love into a global scandal. They called her unfit. They took her child. But behind that photo hides a lie so dark it could destroy the people who framed her. Because this wasn't neglect, it was survival, and someone powerful needs that truth buried for good. Now, she has nothing left to lose, except the one thing she's fighting to get back. When love becomes evidence and lies become law, how far would you go to prove you're a good mother? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The wind howled like a wounded animal as it tore through the dark January night. Ice crystals pelted against the windows of Malloy Ridge Kennels, where Laurel Finch huddled close to her 6-month-old son, Thayer. The old building's heating system groaned and sputtered against the brutal cold of the worst blizzard Briar County had seen in 20 years. Laurel pulled her worn wool sweater tighter around her shoulders, trying to trap what little warmth remained. The kennel's night shift was usually quiet, just her and the dogs, but tonight the storm made everything feel different, more threatening. The wind rattled the windows so hard she feared they might shatter. "It's okay, sweet boy," she whispered to Thayer, who lay bundled in his portable crib near her desk. "Mama's right here." But as she reached down to touch his cheek, her heart nearly stopped. His skin felt cool, too cool. The tip of his tiny nose had taken on a bluish tint. A loud crack echoed through the building, followed by darkness as the power failed. The sudden silence of the heating system felt deafening. Laurel fumbled for her flashlight with trembling hands, clicking it on just as Thayer began to cry, a weak, whimpering sound that terrified her more than his usual robust wails. "No, no, no," she muttered, gathering him close. His blankets felt damp from the cold. She needed to warm him up fast. But how? The building was already growing colder by the minute. Her phone showed no signal. The storm had knocked out the cell towers. They were completely cut off. Laurel paced the dark hallway, her flashlight beam bouncing off the walls as she desperately tried to think. Thayer's cries grew weaker, his little body shivering against her chest. The emergency procedures manual had nothing about total power failure during a blizzard. Mr. Malloy, the owner, hadn't updated the safety protocols in years, too busy attending his fancy dog shows to worry about such details. Then she remembered. The whelping room. It had battery-powered heating, mats for the newborn puppies, separate from the main power system. Her heart leaped with hope as she hurried down the corridor, careful not to slip on the smooth concrete floor. The whelping room door creaked open to reveal 3 German Shepherd puppies nestled together on their heated mat, barely 3 weeks old. They were from her mother's prized bloodline, the last of a legacy that stretched back generations before Mr. Malloy had bought out their family kennel. The pups blinked sleepily at her flashlight beam. Laurel hesitated for just a moment. Was she really considering this? But one look at Thayer's blue-tinged lips made her decision clear. Gently, she laid him in the center of the heated mat. The puppies stirred, curious about their new companion. With trembling fingers, she arranged them around her son, creating a warm, living barrier against the cold. "Be gentle with him, little ones," she whispered, tucking Thayer's blanket carefully around him. The puppies snuffled closer, their tiny bodies radiating heat. Already she could see color returning to her baby's cheeks. But they needed more than just this temporary solution. The generator had to be restarted, or the entire kennel would freeze. The thought of leaving Thyre, even for a few minutes, made her stomach clench with fear. But what choice did she have? "Mama will be right back, precious boy," she promised, her voice catching. "Stay warm with your new friends." The flashlight beam showed the puppies already curled protectively around Thyre, their little bodies providing the warmth he so desperately needed. His eyes were closed, but his breathing had steadied. The blue tinge was fading from his skin. Laurel forced herself to turn away, knowing every second counted. The generator was outside, behind the main building. She zipped her jacket up to her chin, pulled on her work gloves, and grabbed the toolkit from under the sink. The bitter wind hit her like a physical blow as she stepped outside, nearly knocking her off her feet. Snow whipped around her in white sheets, making it almost impossible to see. The beam of her flashlight disappeared into the swirling whiteness. Laurel pressed forward, one arm raised to shield her face. The snow was already past her knees, each step a struggle against the drifts. The generator's housing loomed ahead, a dark shape in the storm. Her fingers, already numb despite the gloves, fumbled with the latch. Inside, the machine sat silent and cold, covered in a thin layer of frost. Laurel played her flashlight over the controls, trying to remember the maintenance training she'd received years ago. "Please," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Please work." The wind screamed around her as she checked the fuel lines, cleared away ice, and primed the starter. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the flashlight twice. All she could think about was Thayer, alone in the whelping room with only puppies for warmth. What kind of mother? Left her baby like that? But what choice did she have? The generator coughed once, twice, then roared to life. Laurel nearly cried with relief. Warm air would soon be flowing through the kennel's vents again. She secured the housing and turned to hurry back inside. But the storm had intensified, the wind now a solid wall of white. She couldn't see the building at all. Panic clawed at her throat as she realized she might not be able to find her way back. The cold was seeping through her clothes, turning her muscles to ice. She thought of Thayer, waiting for her, and forced herself to focus. Step by careful step, she felt her way forward, using the fence line as a guide. The wind tried to tear her away, but she gripped the metal posts with grim determination. Nothing would keep her from getting back to her son. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, her hand struck the building's rough concrete wall. Laurel nearly sobbed with relief as she followed it to the door, fumbling with frozen fingers to get it open. The relative quiet inside felt like a blessing. She stumbled down the hallway, leaving trails of melting snow in her wake. Her legs trembled with cold and exhaustion, but she didn't stop until she reached the whelping room. The sight that greeted her made her heart melt. Thayer was fast asleep, his cheeks pink and healthy, surrounded by the 3 puppies who had snuggled even closer to him. They looked up at her with innocent brown eyes, as if to say, "Don't worry, we kept him safe." Laurel sank to her knees beside the heated mat, tears freezing on her cheeks. The warm air from the vents was already beginning to circulate, but she didn't move Thayer just yet. He looked so peaceful, protected by these tiny guardians who had given him their warmth without hesitation. She reached out to stroke both her son's soft hair and the puppies' fuzzy heads. "Thank you," she whispered to the pups. "Thank you for taking care of my baby." The storm continued to rage outside, but here in this room, Laurel had found a pocket of peace and warmth. She settled down to watch over her son and his furry protectors, knowing that sometimes salvation comes in the most unexpected forms, even in the shape of 3 German Shepherd puppies who didn't hesitate to share their heat with a human child on the coldest night of the year. The wind howled against the windows, but Thayer slept on, safe and warm in his unusual bed, while his mother kept vigil, grateful for the simple miracle of survival and the pure, unquestioning kindness of animals who had helped save her precious child. The first rays of dawn crept through the kennel windows, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted grounds. Leona Price's silver BMW pulled into the parking lot, its tires crunching over the fresh snowfall. She stepped out, immaculately dressed in her designer wool coat and leather boots, looking more suited for a business meeting than a morning at the kennels. Her perfectly manicured fingers clutched her phone as she made her way inside, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. The storm had passed, but its aftermath was evident in the scattered leaves and debris that had blown in under the doors. Leona's nose wrinkled at the mess, mentally noting to reprimand the cleaning staff. As she approached the whelping room, she heard the soft whimpers of puppies. Something seemed off. The door wasn't properly secured, and warm air leaked into the hallway. Leona pushed it open, then froze at the sight before her. There, on one of the heating mats, lay a human baby surrounded by 3 German Shepherd puppies. The infant was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with his furry companions. For a moment, Leona stood transfixed, her calculated mind already spinning with possibilities. She recognized the baby, Laurel Finch's son, the same Laurel whose mother's prestigious breeding line she had slowly absorbed into Malloy Ridge's program after the old woman's death. The same Laurel who had been asking too many questions about the recent death of the puppy's mother. A cold smile spread across Leona's face as she pulled out her phone. This was perfect. Almost too perfect. She carefully adjusted her angle, making sure to capture how the baby lay among the puppies, deliberately framing the shot to look concerning rather than heartwarming. "Evidence," she whispered, snapping several photos. Just in case. She knew the puppy's mother hadn't died from natural causes. The illegal antibiotics she'd used to save money had been a mistake, one that could cost her everything if anyone found out. But now, she had the perfect scapegoat. Leona's fingers flew across her phone screen as she crafted her post. "Absolutely appalled at what I discovered this morning at Malloy Ridge Kennels. An employee abandoned their infant among animals overnight. This level of neglect is unconscionable. As manager, I am taking immediate action. Animal welfare. Child endangerment." She attached the most damning photo, the one where the baby looked particularly vulnerable among the puppies. With a satisfied smirk, she hit post and watched as it began to spread across social media like wildfire. Within minutes, the notifications started pouring in. Shares, comments, likes, all expressing outrage at the supposed negligence. Leona refreshed her screen repeatedly, watching the numbers climb. "Perfect," she murmured, tucking her phone away. She wouldn't fire Laurel immediately. That would be too obvious. Better to let public opinion do the work for her. Let the pressure build until Laurel had no choice but to resign in shame. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Leona straighten up. She quickly composed her features into a mask of concern just as Laurel appeared in the doorway, her clothes still wet from the storm, her face flushed from the cold. "Miss Price!" Laurel exclaimed, surprised to see her boss so early. "I had to restart the generator during the night. The power went out, and it was so cold." "Save your explanations, Laurel," Leona cut her off coldly. "I've seen enough. Do you have any idea how many regulations you've violated? Bringing your personal problems to work is one thing, but this—" She gestured to Thayer, who was beginning to stir. Laurel rushed to her son, scooping him up carefully. The puppies whined at the loss of their sleeping companion. "You don't understand," she started to explain. "It was an emergency. He was turning blue from the cold. The whelping room was the only place with battery-powered heating mats." "I've already documented everything," Leona interrupted, her voice sharp with false authority. "The board will be very interested in reviewing this incident. For now, I suggest you take the rest of the day off. We'll discuss your future with Malloy Ridge later." Laurel's face paled as she held Thayer closer. "The board? But I didn't do anything wrong. I was protecting my son." Leona's phone buzzed continuously in her pocket. More notifications from her viral post. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "I suggest you check social media, Laurel. I think you'll find that public opinion differs from yours." As if on cue, Laurel's own phone began to vibrate. Friends and family were already sending her concerned messages about the viral post they'd seen. Her hands shaking, she pulled up the photo Leona had shared. The image was devastating, carefully angled to make it look like neglect rather than the desperate act of protection it had been. The comments beneath were even worse. "What kind of mother does this? She should lose her job and her kid. Someone call child services." Laurel looked up at Leona, tears welling in her eyes as understanding dawned. This wasn't just about last night. This was calculated. This was revenge. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" Leona adjusted her designer scarf with practiced nonchalance. "I simply documented what I found, Laurel. As manager, it's my responsibility to report any concerning behavior. Now, I suggest you leave before this situation becomes even more uncomfortable." Clutching Thayer to her chest, Laurel backed toward the door. Her mind raced with the implications of what was happening. She knew about the questions surrounding the mother dog's death. She had noticed the unmarked medications, the missing records. Now it all made terrible sense. But as she looked into Leona's cold, calculating eyes, she realized she was trapped. Who would believe her word against the respected manager of Malloy Ridge Kennels, especially now, with that damning photo spreading across the internet? The puppies whimpered again, as if sensing her distress. One of them, the smallest, tried to follow her to the door. The simple innocence of the gesture made Laurel's heart ache. These puppies had helped save her son's life, and now their existence was being used to destroy her. "Go home, Laurel," Leona said firmly. "We'll be in touch about your position here." With tears streaming down her face, Laurel hurried through the kennel's halls, past the curious stares of arriving morning staff who had already seen the viral post. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications, each one feeling like another nail in the coffin of her reputation. As she stepped out into the bright morning sun, the contrast between the peace of last night's moment with the puppies and the chaos of her current situation was staggering. Behind her, Leona watched from the kennel doorway, a satisfied smile playing at her lips as she refreshed her phone screen once more. The post had reached over 10,000 shares. The morning sun had barely warmed the frozen ground when two vehicles pulled into Malloy Ridge Kennel's parking lot, a white government sedan and a police cruiser. Laurel watched them approach through the kennel office window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Thayer dozed peacefully in his carrier, unaware of the storm about to break. The first knock echoed like thunder. Laurel opened the door with trembling hands to find a stern-faced woman in a charcoal pantsuit and Deputy Calder Boone, whose usually kind face was shadowed with concern. "Ms. Finch?" The woman's voice was clipped and professional. "I'm Sandra Martinez from Child Protective Services. We're here regarding a report of child endangerment." Laurel clutched the doorframe for support. "Please, you have to understand. It was an emergency situation. The power went out during the blizzard. Ma'am, we'll need to see your son. Deputy Boone interrupted gently, his badge catching the morning light. Before Laurel could respond, Leona appeared behind them, her designer boots clicking against the concrete. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "I've been so worried. I have photos documenting everything." Laurel's world narrowed to a pinpoint as she watched Leona pull up the damning images on her phone. The CPS worker's face hardened as she swiped through them. "The generator logs," Laurel blurted out. "They'll show exactly when the power failed. I can prove it was an emergency." She fumbled with her phone, trying to access the kennel's maintenance system. "The logs were unfortunately corrupted during the power outage," Leona interjected smoothly. "But I have multiple witnesses who can attest to Ms. Finch's concerning behavior leading up to this incident." Deputy Boone shifted uncomfortably. "Laurel, please, let's not make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" Laurel's voice cracked. "You don't understand. I was protecting him. The temperature was dropping so fast, he was turning blue. The whelping room was the only place with battery-powered heating mats. I had to keep him warm while I fixed the generator." Ms. Martinez made a note on her tablet. "And you left your infant alone with animals to do this?" "They were newborn puppies," Laurel protested. "They wouldn't hurt him. They helped save his life." "I tried to overlook the signs," Leona said, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Laurel's been struggling since becoming a single mother, working late shifts, bringing the baby to work, sleeping on the job. But when I found her child abandoned with the dogs this morning, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer." "That's not true!" Laurel's voice rose desperately. "Leona, please, tell them the truth about what really happened to the mother dog." Leona's eyes flashed with warning before filling with fresh tears. "You see? She's becoming hysterical, making wild accusations. This is exactly what I was afraid of." Ms. Martinez stepped forward. "Ms. Finch, we're removing Thayer from your custody pending a full investigation. Given that your housing is tied to your employment here, we'll need you to vacate the premises," Leona finished coldly. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." The world tilted sideways. Laurel stumbled back, shaking her head. No, you can't. He's all I have." "You can't take my baby," she whispered, but her protests fell on deaf ears as Ms. Martinez moved toward Thayer's carrier. Deputy Boone stepped forward, his face etched with genuine regret. "I'm sorry, Laurel. It's temporary, just until things get sorted out. You'll have a chance to explain everything to the judge." Laurel lunged for the carrier, but Deputy Boone gently blocked her path. "Don't make this worse," he murmured. "Think about what's best for Thayer right now." She watched, paralyzed, as Ms. Martinez lifted her sleeping son. Thayer's eyes fluttered open, and he began to cry, a sound that shattered what was left of Laurel's heart. "Wait," she begged. "Please, let me at least pack his things, his formula, his favorite blanket." "We'll provide everything he needs," Ms. Martinez assured her, already heading for the door. "You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings," Leona announced, her professional mask firmly back in place. "Security will escort you." Laurel's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, watching through tears as they carried her son away. Deputy Boone lingered in the doorway, conflict written across his features. "Here's my card," he said quietly, pressing it into her trembling hand. "Call me if you need anything." Then he too was gone, leaving Laurel alone with Leona and the burly security guard who had materialized to oversee her departure. "Why?" Laurel choked out, looking up at her former boss. "Why did you do this to us?" Leona's perfectly painted lips curved into a cold smile. You should have minded your own business about the breeding program, Laurel. Some questions are better left unasked. She turned on her heel, leaving Laurel to gather the pieces of her shattered life under the watchful eye of security. 1 hour to pack up 5 years of memories. 1 hour to say goodbye to the dogs she'd raised, the life she'd built, the home she'd made for herself and Thayer. In the whelping room, the puppies whined as she passed, pressing their tiny bodies against the gate. The smallest one, the one who'd helped keep her son warm through that desperate night, pawed at her through the bars. "I'm sorry," she whispered, touching its soft head one last time. "I'm so sorry." With nothing but a hastily packed duffel bag and her phone, still buzzing with hateful messages from strangers, Laurel walked out of Malloy Ridge Kennels. Behind her, the security guard changed the codes on the gate, locking her out of everything she'd ever worked for. She stood in the parking lot, clutching Deputy Boone's card and watching the morning sun rise over the kennels where her mother's legacy lived on, in those precious puppies. Puppies she would never see grow up. The same sun that had promised hope just hours ago now illuminated the ruins of her life, leaving nowhere to hide from the harsh reality of all she had lost. The sound of Thayer's cry still echoed in her ears, a reminder of the impossible choice she'd made to save his life, a choice that had cost her everything. The borrowed trailer creaked in the bitter winter wind. Laurel sat cross-legged on a threadbare couch, surrounded by the few possessions she'd managed to grab during her rushed exodus from Malloy Ridge. The space was tiny, barely big enough for a kitchenette, bathroom, and this cramped living area that would double as her bedroom. But at least it was shelter. Her old high school friend Sarah had offered it without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," she'd said, pressing the key into Laurel's palm. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." Now, in the harsh afternoon light, Laurel stared at her phone. The screen displayed yet another social media pile-on, complete strangers calling her horrible names: monster, animal, unfit mother. Each word felt like a physical blow. "That's not what happened," she whispered to the empty trailer. "That's not what happened at all." She closed her eyes, forcing herself to replay that desperate night. The howling wind, the sudden darkness, Thayer's skin turning blue, the frantic race against time. Every decision she'd made had been to save her son's life. How had it turned into something so twisted? Her hands shook as she opened the duffel bag she'd hastily packed. Clothes spilled out, along with a stack of papers she'd grabbed instinctively from her desk drawer. Old habit, after years of being blamed for others' mistakes at the kennel, she'd learned to keep copies of everything. Laurel spread the documents across the coffee table, organizing them by date: breeding records, medication logs, veterinary reports. Her eyes caught on a notation from 3 weeks ago, the day the mother shepherd had died mysteriously. She remembered Leona's strange behavior that day, how she'd insisted on administering the medications herself, how she'd snapped at Laurel for asking questions about the unlabeled vials. At the time, Laurel had chalked it up to stress over losing a valuable breeding dog. Now, "Some questions are better left unasked," Leona had said. The words echoed in Laurel's mind as she studied the papers more closely. There, in her own careful handwriting, was a note about finding empty antibiotic bottles in the medical waste bin. Antibiotics that weren't on the approved medication list. Antibiotics that, if she remembered correctly from her mother's teachings, could be lethal to pregnant dogs if administered incorrectly. Laurel's hands moved faster now, sorting through the papers with renewed purpose. She found the breeding program documentation, showing the mother dog's impressive lineage and projected value. The insurance forms indicating a substantial payout in the event of the dog's death. And finally, tucked between routine paperwork, a receipt she'd copied showing a large cash withdrawal from the kennel's account the day before the shepherd died. "Oh my God," she breathed, pieces clicking into place. The illegal antibiotics, the insurance money, Leona's desperate need to silence any questions about the mother dog's death. The photo of Thayer with the puppies wasn't just opportunistic cruelty. It was a calculated move to discredit the one person who might expose the truth. Laurel's phone buzzed again. Another hateful message. But this time, instead of flinching, she felt something else stirring in her chest. Something hot and fierce that burned away the fog of despair. She reached for her laptop, another lucky grab during her hasty packing, and began making digital copies of everything. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she organized the evidence into a coherent timeline. "You picked the wrong person to frame," she muttered, determination hardening her voice. "I'm getting my son back." The wind rattled the trailer's thin walls, but Laurel barely noticed. She was too focused on her work, carefully documenting every detail that might help prove her innocence. Deputy Boone's card sat beside her laptop, her first call tomorrow morning. A text from Sarah broke her concentration. "Brought you some dinner, outside your door." Laurel found a warm casserole dish and a note. "Don't give up. We're all behind you." Tears pricked her eyes, but these weren't tears of despair. For the first time since that terrible morning, she felt something like hope. She had evidence, she had friends, and most importantly, she had the fierce, unshakable love of a mother for her child. The social media mob could call her whatever names they wanted. Leona could try to bury the truth under a mountain of lies. But Laurel Finch was her mother's daughter, and her mother had taught her that justice, like the best breeding lines, required patience, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. She turned back to her laptop, determination burning bright in her heart. Somewhere in these papers was the key to exposing Leona's scheme and reuniting with Thayer. All she had to do was find it. Outside, the winter wind continued to howl, but inside the tiny trailer, a fire had been lit, one that would not be extinguished until truth and justice prevailed. The numbers swam before Laurel's tired eyes as she pored over the kennel records for the 100th time. Something wasn't adding up, literally. She'd been staring at the vaccination logs for so long that the coffee in her mug had gone cold, untouched. Laurel pushed her chair back from the trailer's small table and rubbed her eyes. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows across the scattered papers. She reached for a different set of records, the temperature charts from the past month. Wait. There it was. Her heart started beating faster as she compared the numbers. The digital thermometer readings she'd recorded during her evening checks were consistently different from the official logs Leona had submitted to the state inspector. Not by much, just a degree or two here and there. But enough to hide the fact that the kennel's heating system had been failing long before the night of the storm. "You knew," Laurel whispered, anger rising in her throat. "You knew those heaters were going out." She grabbed another stack of papers, the medication records. Now that she knew what to look for, the pattern was clear. Leona had been altering data everywhere. Vaccine dates changed, antibiotic batch numbers missing, doses that didn't match what Laurel remembered administering. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Dr. Camila Del Rio, the veterinarian who handled most of Malloy Ridge's medical care. The phone rang 4 times before a warm, accented voice answered. "Dr. Del Rio speaking." "Dr. Del Rio? This is Laurel Finch from Malloy Ridge. Well, formerly from Malloy Ridge." There was a pause. "Ah, yes, I saw the news. I'm so sorry, Laurel." "I need your help," Laurel said, trying to keep her voice steady. Something's wrong with these medical records. And I remember you leaving a message the night of the storm. Something about concerns with the medications Leona was using. Another pause. Longer this time. When Dr. Del Rio spoke again, her voice was careful. Perhaps we should discuss this in person. Can you come to my clinic? I close at 6 o'clock tonight. I'll be there, Laurel promised. The veterinary clinic sat on the outskirts of town, a low brick building surrounded by bare winter trees. Laurel parked her old truck in the nearly empty lot, gathering her courage before heading inside. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and pet shampoo. A tabby cat dozed in a sunny window, and somewhere in the back, a dog barked. Dr. Del Rio emerged from an exam room, still wearing her white coat, her dark hair escaping from its practical bun. Come to my office, she said quietly, leading the way. The office was cramped but orderly, with filing cabinets lining one wall and framed veterinary certificates on another. Dr. Del Rio closed the door and gestured for Laurel to sit. I've been expecting you, she said, settling behind her desk. And I've been feeling guilty about not speaking up sooner. About what? The veterinarian opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. I've had concerns about Leona's practices for months. The morning the mother shepherd died, I found empty vials of restricted antibiotics in the medical waste, medications I hadn't prescribed. When I confronted Leona, she claimed they were left over from a previous vet. But they weren't? No, they were black market drugs, cheaper versions of approved medications, but dangerous because they're not properly regulated. I left a voicemail that night warning her to stop using them. Dr. Del Rio's face showed a mixture of anger and regret. I should have reported it immediately, but I was trying to give her a chance to correct the situation. Laurel leaned forward. Do you still have that voicemail? Better. Dr. Del Rio pulled out her phone. I saved a recording of it, along with photos of the vials. I had a feeling I might need proof someday. She paused. Laurel, I'm so sorry about what happened to you and your son. I should have spoken up sooner. You're speaking up now, Laurel said quietly. That's what matters. After leaving the clinic with copies of Dr. Del Rio's evidence, Laurel made one more stop. She drove out past the county line to a small farm she hadn't visited in years, not since her mother's death. Emmett Blaze was in his workshop, the smell of leather and saddle soap bringing back a rush of childhood memories. His weathered face creased into a smile when he saw her. Little Laurel Finch, he said, setting aside the bridle he was repairing, though not so little anymore. Hi, Emmett. She hugged him, breathing in the familiar scents of leather and hay. I need your help. They sat on worn wooden chairs, while Laurel explained everything, the storm, the puppies, Leona's deception, and the evidence she was gathering. Emmett listened silently, his blue eyes serious behind his thick glasses. Those puppies, he said when she finished. They were from your mother's bloodline, weren't they? Laurel nodded. The last of them. Leona bred the mother too young, against all the protocols my mother established. Emmett stood with a slight grunt, favoring his bad leg as he walked to an old filing cabinet. Your mother kept records of everything, breeding charts going back 4 generations. He pulled out a manila envelope, yellowed with age, including specific guidelines about breeding ages and intervals. Laurel took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were meticulously detailed charts in her mother's familiar handwriting, along with photographs of champion dogs and official registration papers. Leona's been destroying your mother's legacy, Emmett said quietly. Not just the dogs, but everything she stood for. Proper care, ethical breeding, putting the animal's welfare first. I know, Laurel's voice caught, and she used my son to cover it up. Emmett's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steadying. Your mother would be proud of you, fighting back like this. She never let anyone push her around either." "I'm scared," Laurel admitted. "Leona has so much power, so many connections." "But you have something stronger," Emmett said. "The truth. And now you have proof." Looking down at the growing stack of evidence, Dr. Del Rio's photos, her mother's records, the altered kennel logs, Laurel felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it was being overshadowed by determination. She carefully packed everything into her bag, making sure the papers wouldn't bend. "Thank you, Emmett, for keeping these safe all these years." "Your mother trusted me to look after her legacy," he said simply. "Now it's your turn to carry it forward." As Laurel drove back to her borrowed trailer, her mind was already racing with next steps. The evidence was mounting. Leona's negligence with the heating system, the illegal medications that killed the mother dog, the violated breeding protocols. Soon, she would have enough to prove that the tragedy that night wasn't caused by her desperate choice to keep her son alive, but by Leona's pattern of cuts and corners. The truth was finally emerging, one document at a time. Back in her borrowed trailer, Laurel spread the evidence across her small folding table. The stark fluorescent light cast harsh shadows over Dr. Del Rio's photos of the illegal medication vials, her mother's meticulous breeding records, and the kennel logs she'd managed to copy before being forced out. Her hands trembled as she arranged everything chronologically. The dates told a story, one of systematic negligence and corner-cutting that had ultimately led to that desperate night. She grabbed a notepad and began making detailed notes, her handwriting growing steadier as determination replaced exhaustion. A soft knock at her door made her jump. Through the window, she saw Deputy Calder Boone standing outside, his broad shoulders hunched against the evening chill. Her heart raced. Was he here to take away what little she had left? But when she opened the door, his expression wasn't official. It was troubled. "Ms. Finch," he said quietly, "may I come in? There are some things about your case that aren't sitting right with me." Laurel hesitated, then stepped back to let him enter. The trailer felt even smaller with his tall frame inside. His gaze swept over the papers on her table, but he didn't comment. "I've been reviewing the incident report," he said, pulling out his notebook. "The timestamps don't match up. According to the surveillance logs, Leona didn't enter the kennel until 5:45 in the morning, but her social media post went up at 5:15. She posted before she actually found Thayer?" Laurel's mind raced. It means she knew what she was going to find," Calder finished. "Or she staged what she wanted to find." Laurel's hands shook as she pulled out her own copy of the kennel entry logs. "Look at this. There are gaps in the security footage from that morning. 2 30-minute blocks, completely missing." Calder leaned in, his shoulder brushing hers as he studied the logs. Right when she would have been setting up her story. He straightened, running a hand through his hair. "I should have questioned this more thoroughly from the start. I'm sorry, Miss Finch." "Laurel," she corrected softly, "and you're questioning it now." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Del Rio stood outside, holding a thick manila envelope. Her eyes widened slightly at seeing Calder, but she quickly composed herself. "I found more evidence," she said as Laurel let her in. "Temperature logs from the past 6 months. Leona's been falsifying them to hide equipment malfunctions." The small trailer was cramped with 3 people, but none of them noticed as they gathered around the table. Dr. Del Rio spread out her new documents while Laurel and Calder explained what they'd discovered about the timestamps. The generator failure that night wasn't an isolated incident, Dr. Del Rio explained, pointing to a pattern of inconsistencies in the maintenance logs. "Leona's been ignoring repair requests for months. The backup systems should have kicked in automatically, but they were never properly serviced." Calder pulled out his phone and began taking photos of everything. We need to document all of this properly. Laurel, would you be willing to make a formal statement? Of course. Laurel's voice strengthened. I have more. Emmett Blaze gave me my mother's original breeding records. They prove Leona violated every safety protocol with that mother dog. They worked late into the night, cross-referencing documents and building a timeline. Calder's law enforcement experience helped them organize the evidence in a way that would hold up to scrutiny. Dr. Del Rio's medical knowledge provided crucial context for the medication violations, and Laurel's intimate knowledge of the kennel's operations helped them spot discrepancies others might have missed. Look at this, Laurel said, pointing to a series of deletions in the computer logs. The morning after her post went viral, Leona spent 3 hours erasing records, but she didn't know about the automatic backups to the cloud server. Can you access those backups? Calder asked. Laurel nodded. I still have my login credentials. She never changed them. She pulled out her laptop and began typing. Here, everything she deleted, time-stamped and authenticated. Dr. Del Rio leaned forward. Including my warnings about the illegal medications? All of it. Laurel's screen filled with recovered documents. Every corner. She cut. Every protocol she violated. Every warning she ignored. Calder took more photos. His jaw set. This is enough to warrant a formal investigation. Not just into your case, Laurel, but into the entire operation. Will it be enough to get my son back? Laurel's voice cracked slightly. It's a strong start, Calder said gently. We can prove you acted to save Thayer's life during an emergency that Leona's negligence created, and we can prove she deliberately twisted the situation to cover her own mistakes. Dr. Del Rio touched Laurel's arm. You're not alone in this anymore. We'll all testify to what we know. Laurel looked at her unlikely allies, the deputy who'd first come to take her son, now determined to help her get him back, the veterinarian who'd found her conscience and her courage, and though not present, the old trainer who'd preserved the proof of her mother's legacy. Thank you, she whispered. All of you. Don't thank us yet, Calder said, but his eyes were kind. We've got a lot of work ahead. Leona won't go down without a fight. But she will go down, Dr. Del Rio said firmly. The truth has a way of coming out. They worked for several more hours, organizing their evidence into clear, chronological order. Calder made copies of everything, storing them safely in his squad car. Dr. Del Rio compiled her medical documentation into a formal report. Laurel backed up all the digital records onto multiple drives. As the night deepened, their small alliance grew stronger. They weren't just 3 individuals anymore. They were a team united by purpose and truth. Each brought their own piece of the puzzle. Calder's dedication to justice, Dr. Del Rio's professional integrity, and Laurel's unwavering love for her son. The lies that had seemed so overwhelming began to crumble under the weight of evidence. Leona's carefully constructed facade was about to face its first real challenge. And this time, Laurel wasn't standing alone against the storm. Leona Price's heels clicked sharply against the polished floor of Malloy Ridge Kennel's main office. Her reflection in the windows showed a woman perfectly put together, but her manicured nails dug into her palms as she paced. Someone had accessed the digital records last night. She'd gotten the alert on her phone, and she knew exactly who it had to be. She snatched up her phone and dialed Burton Malloy's private number. Within minutes, the elderly owner's car pulled into the circular drive. Leona hurried out to meet him, her face a mask of practiced concern. Mr. Malloy, thank you for coming so quickly. She helped him from his car, noting how his usually crisp suit looked slightly rumpled. I hate to trouble you with this, but we have a situation. Burton Malloy adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. What's happened, Leona? Your message sounded urgent. It's Laurel Finch. Leona guided him inside, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. She's trying to blackmail us. She's threatening to release falsified records unless we pay her and retract the neglect report. Malloy's face darkened. Blackmail? That doesn't sound like the Finch girl I knew. People change, sir. Leona pulled out a carefully prepared folder. Look at these emails. She's desperate after losing custody, and now she's working with Dr. Del Rio to fabricate evidence against us. She watched as Malloy reviewed the doctored emails she'd created. His hands shook slightly as he read. This is serious, he muttered. If word gets out... Exactly. Leona leaned forward. Our reputation, your family's legacy, could be destroyed. And Dr. Del Rio, well, I hate to say it, but she's been writing prescriptions without proper documentation. If the medical board investigated... Malloy looked up sharply. You're certain? I have proof. Another folder appeared from Leona's desk. More fabricated documents, each one carefully crafted to support her lies. She's been cutting corners, sir, and now she's helping Laurel attack us to cover her own mistakes. Across town, Dr. Camila Del Rio was examining a rescue dog when her office phone rang. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Dr. Del Rio, Burton Malloy is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Camilla's stomach tightened. She picked up the phone. This is Dr. Del Rio. Doctor. Malloy's voice was cold. I've just reviewed some disturbing information about your prescribing practices and your involvement with Laurel Finch's attempted extortion. Sir, I don't know what you've been told, but I suggest you consider your position very carefully. The threat in his voice was clear. Your license, your practice, everything you've worked for could disappear very quickly. Camilla's hand tightened on the receiver. Are you threatening me, Mr. Malloy? I'm trying to protect you. Distance yourself from Laurel Finch and destroy any altered records she convinced you to create. Otherwise, the medical board will receive a very detailed report about your irregular practices. The line went dead. Camilla stood frozen, her mind racing. She knew Leona was behind this, but knowing didn't make the threat any less real. Back at the kennel, Leona gathered her staff in the break room. I need everyone's help, she announced, her voice thick with fake emotion. Someone is trying to damage our reputation with false accusations. We need to protect ourselves and the dogs. She passed out assignments, directing them to gather and shred specific files, delete digital records, and rewrite logs. Most of the staff complied without question. They'd learned not to challenge Leona's authority. Meanwhile, Deputy Calder Boone sat at his desk, frowning at his computer screen. He'd been reviewing Thayer's case file, and something wasn't adding up. Child Protective Services cases usually took weeks to process, but Thayer had been removed within hours of the viral post. He picked up his phone and called the regional CPS office. This is Deputy Boone from Bryan County Sheriff's Department. I need to verify some timeline details on the Finch case. One moment. He heard keyboard clicks. That case was processed through our emergency protocol system. Based on what criteria? Let me check. We received multiple high-priority reports indicating immediate danger to the child. The initial call came from... There was a pause. I'm sorry, Deputy, but I can't release that information without a warrant. But Calder had heard enough. Emergency protocols required multiple independent reports of immediate danger, not just one viral social media post. Someone had manipulated the system. He pulled out his cell phone and texted Laurel. Found something. CPS case was rushed through. Someone called in fake reports. Across town in her borrowed trailer, Laurel read the message with shaking hands. She'd suspected Leona's influence reached far, but this was beyond what she'd imagined. Her phone buzzed again, Dr. Del Rio calling. "Laurel," Camilla's voice was tense. "Malloy just threatened my license. Leona's gotten to him." "What? How?" "She showed him emails, claims we're trying to blackmail the kennel. She's telling everyone I helped you falsify records." Camilla took a shuddering breath. "Laurel, I want to help you, but my whole career—" "I understand," Laurel said softly, even as her heart sank. "We'll find another way." She ended the call and sat heavily on her worn couch. Leona was systematically cutting off every avenue of support, using her position and influence like a weapon. How many other people would she threaten? How many records would disappear before they could prove the truth? Back at the kennel, Leona watched with satisfaction as her staff systematically erased every trace of the dead mother dog and her litter. Medical records, birth certificates, vaccination logs, all of it disappeared into industrial shredders or vanished from hard drives. She picked up her phone and dialed another number. "Hello, Karen. This is Leona Price from Malloy Ridge. Listen, about that placement hearing for Thayer Finch, I have some additional concerns I think the judge should hear." Her perfectly painted lips curved into a smile as she stared out at the kennels. She'd worked too hard, climbed too high to let someone like Laurel Finch tear it all down. If protecting her position meant destroying one small family, well, that was just business. In his patrol car, Calder reviewed his notes again. The timing of the CPS calls, the rushed removal, the coordinated social media attack, it all pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan. But proving it would be another matter entirely. He needed access to phone records, internal CPS documents, original kennel files. His radio crackled. "Deputy Boone, please respond to a disturbance at Malloy Ridge Kennels." Calder keyed his mic. "Copy that. En route." As he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that Leona was several steps ahead of them. She'd built her web of influence carefully, strand by strand, until she could pull strings they couldn't even see, and now she was using that power to maintain her lies, no matter who got hurt in the process. The question was, how do you fight someone who can make the truth disappear? The morning sun cast long shadows across Laurel's borrowed trailer as she heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. Through the window, she spotted Emmett Blaze's weathered pickup truck pulling up, a cloud of dust settling in its wake. Her heart quickened. He'd promised to look through his old files, though she hadn't dared hope he'd find anything useful. Emmett emerged slowly, favoring his bad leg as he retrieved a thick manila envelope from the passenger seat. His blue eyes behind those thick lenses held an intensity she hadn't seen before. Laurel met him at the door, Thayer's empty baby blanket clutched unconsciously in her hands. She'd taken to holding it while she worked, the soft fabric a poor substitute for her son's warmth. "You better sit down for this," Emmett said quietly, limping to her small kitchen table. She pulled out a chair, watching as his weathered hands carefully opened the envelope. The papers inside were yellowed with age, but she recognized her mother's neat handwriting immediately. "Found these in my old filing cabinet," Emmett explained, spreading out several documents. "Your mother was always meticulous about paperwork. Good thing, too, because this changes everything." Laurel leaned forward, scanning the first page. It was a breeding contract, dated 15 years ago. Her mother's signature was bold and clear at the bottom. "I don't understand," she began, but Emmett held up a hand. "Keep reading." As her eyes moved down the page, certain phrases jumped out. Protected bloodline, genetic preservation, family custody clause. Her hands began to shake. "That litter," Emmett said softly. "The one Thayer was found with? They're from your mother's original line, the last pure descendants of her champion shepherds." Laurel's mind raced back to that desperate night. 3 tiny puppies, barely a week old, huddled around her son for warmth. She'd been so focused on saving Thyre, she hadn't even checked their lineage tags. According to this contract, Emmett continued, tapping the paper, these dogs can't be sold or transferred outside the family without proper documentation and inspection. Your mother set it up that way to protect the bloodline. But Malloy Ridge owns them now, Laurel protested. After Mom died. Emmett shook his head. They acquired the kennel operations, yes, but not the breeding rights to this specific line. That stayed with you. Your mother made sure of it. He pulled out another document, this one newer. Look at these shipping manifests I found. Leona's been arranging private sales overseas, high-dollar deals for premium breeding stock. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Laurel felt the blood drain from her face. The viral photo, it wasn't just to cover up the mother's death from those illegal antibiotics. No, Emmett agreed grimly. It was staged to create a distraction. While everyone was focused on the scandal, she could move those pups out of the country before anyone realized what bloodline they came from. Laurel stood abruptly, pacing the small trailer. She needed me discredited and gone. If I was labeled an unfit mother, who would believe me about the breeding rights? Exactly. Emmett carefully gathered the papers. But she didn't count on these records existing. Your mother trusted me to keep copies, just in case. Laurel stopped at the window, staring unseeing at the morning landscape. Those puppies weren't just Thayer's saviors that night. They're part of Mom's legacy, what she worked her whole life to create. And legally they belong to you, Emmett emphasized. The contract is ironclad. I had your mother's lawyer review it back then. New energy surged through Laurel. This wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. This was about protecting something precious, something her mother had entrusted to her. We need to move fast, she said, turning back to Emmett. Leona's already trying to erase records. If those pups disappear... Already thought of that. Emmett pulled out his phone. I've got copies of everything digitized and stored safely. And I made some calls. There's a breed inspector willing to come verify the bloodline. He owes me a favor from the old days. Laurel sat back down, her mind racing with possibilities. This could change everything. If we can prove the puppy's lineage, prove Leona was trying to sell them illegally, it won't just expose her current scheme, Emmett agreed. It'll make people question everything else she's done, including what happened that night with Thayer. Fresh tears sprang to Laurel's eyes as she touched her son's blanket. He saved them as much as they saved him. All this time, I thought it was just luck that brought them together. Maybe it was more than luck, Emmett said softly. Your mother always said these dogs had something special, an instinct for protecting what matters most. Laurel carefully gathered the precious documents. We need to get these somewhere safe. Leona's already threatened Dr. Del Rio. If she finds out about this... Already handled, Emmett assured her. I've got friends from the old circuit days, people who remembered your mother, respected what she built. They're ready to help. A warm surge of gratitude filled Laurel. After weeks of feeling alone against Leona's influence, it was overwhelming to discover this network of support and this tangible link to her mother's wisdom and foresight. Mom knew, she whispered. She knew someday someone might try to take advantage. That's why she put all these protections in place. Emmett nodded, his eyes distant with memory. She was a smart woman, your mother. Understood that. Some things are worth protecting no matter what. Those dogs aren't just valuable breeding stock. They're a legacy of integrity, of doing things right. Laurel stood straighter, feeling her mother's strength flowing through those yellowed pages. Then we'll honor that legacy. We'll stop Leona from destroying everything Mom worked for. That's the spirit, Emmett smiled. Now, let's get these documents somewhere secure. Then we need to move fast, before those pups disappear into some overseas kennel. As they carefully packed away the precious papers, Laurel felt hope blooming stronger than ever. She had more than just evidence now. She had proof of her mother's faith in her, proof that she was part of something larger than herself. Those 3 puppies weren't just innocent victims of Leona's schemes. They were living links to her mother's dreams, to years of careful breeding and loving dedication. And somehow, on that desperate night, they had found their way to protecting her most precious treasure, her son. The truth was bigger than she'd imagined, and for the first time, Laurel felt truly ready to fight for it. Not just for Thayer, not just for herself, but for everything her mother had believed in and worked to preserve. The battle ahead would be harder than ever, but now she knew exactly what was at stake. And she wouldn't let her mother's legacy disappear into Leona's web of lies. Laurel's hands trembled as she stared at the old building plans spread across Calder's desk. The deputy had pulled them from county records after their discovery of Emmett's breeding documents. Now, in the quiet of the sheriff's office after hours, those faded blueprints revealed something unexpected. There, Calder pointed to a notation in the corner. The original security system installation from 15 years ago. Look at the wiring diagram. Laurel leaned closer, her heart beginning to race. It shows 2 recording stations, but I've only ever seen the one in Leona's office. Exactly. Calder's voice was low and steady. The backup system was installed in the basement utility room, standard practice back then, keeping a second set of eyes running on a separate circuit. But that's impossible, Laurel whispered. I've worked there for years. I've never seen another system. Calder shifted some papers, revealing older maintenance records. Because it was hidden behind the newer electrical panels when they renovated, most folks probably forgot it was there. But according to these logs, it was never removed, just covered up. Hope fluttered in Laurel's chest, wild and dangerous. If it was still recording that night, we need to check, Calder said firmly. But we have to be smart about this. If that system caught anything important, we can't let Leona know we found it. They planned carefully over the next hour. Calder would arrange a routine security check of the kennel property, standard procedure after recent break-ins at other businesses. While he kept Leona occupied, Laurel would use her old maintenance keys to access the basement. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Laurel's stomach churned as she watched Calder's patrol car pull into the kennel driveway. Right on schedule, Leona emerged from her office, perfectly coiffed despite the early hour. Even from her hiding spot behind the storage shed, Laurel could see the manager's artificial smile. She counted to 60, giving them time to move toward the kennels. Then she slipped around to the basement entrance, her old keys feeling foreign in her shaking hands. The lock turned smoothly. Maintenance access hadn't been changed yet. The basement air hit her like a wall of memories. How many times had she come down here to check heaters or clean filters? But now the familiar space felt different, heavy with secrets. Laurel clicked on her flashlight, sweeping it across the maze of pipes and electrical panels. The new circuit breakers gleamed on the east wall, just as the plans had shown. Laurel ran her fingers along the edge of the metal housing. There, a seam that didn't quite match. She pressed gently, and a hidden panel swung open. Behind it sat an old DVR unit, covered in dust but still humming softly. A small green light blinked steadily. Still recording. Still watching. Laurel's hands shook as she connected her laptop to the system. The password prompt made her pause. But then she smiled, remembering how the old maintenance supervisor had used the same code for everything. She typed it in. Malloy 1955. The screen flickered to life. Her heart nearly stopped as she navigated to that terrible night. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., just after the power failed. The grainy footage clearly showed her rushing into the whelping room with Thayer, tucking him safely between the puppies. Then her desperate run to the generator. But it was what happened next that made her gasp. At 12:15 a.m., Leona appeared in the frame. She wasn't supposed to be there. She'd claimed she only discovered the scene at dawn. The manager moved purposefully through the dim emergency lights, checking each pen. When she reached the failing mother dog, she pulled something from her pocket. A syringe. Laurel pressed a hand to her mouth as she watched Leona inject the dam, then carefully arrange the scene. The mother dog's collapse wasn't natural. It wasn't an accident at all. The footage continued, showing Leona's return at dawn. This time she had her phone ready, carefully composing the photo that would destroy Laurel's life. The timestamp proved the image was staged hours after the actual emergency. "Got it," Laurel whispered, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she copied the crucial segments. She had just finished when footsteps echoed above, headed toward the basement stairs. Her heart pounding, Laurel disconnected her laptop and carefully closed the hidden panel. She barely made it behind a stack of storage bins before the door opened. "I don't see why this is necessary." Leona's voice drifted down. "Our security system is state-of-the-art." "Just being thorough, ma'am." Calder's boots appeared on the stairs. "Recent break-ins have everyone worried. Better safe than sorry." Laurel held her breath as they moved through the basement. Leona's heels clicked impatiently on the concrete floor. "Well, as you can see, everything's perfectly normal down here. Just maintenance equipment and storage. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an important call with our Korean buyers." "Of course." Calder's voice gave nothing away. "Thank you for your time." Laurel waited until their footsteps faded before sagging against the wall, clutching her laptop like a lifeline. The truth was finally tangible, recorded proof of Leona's lies. But they had to move fast. If Leona suspected anything, that hidden DVR would be the first thing to disappear. She slipped out of the basement and around to her car, parked several blocks away. Her hands were still shaking as she drove to their predetermined meeting spot, a quiet diner on the edge of town. Calder arrived 20 minutes later, sliding into the booth across from her. "Did you find it?" In answer, Laurel turned her laptop around. They watched in silence as the damning footage played out. Calder's jaw tightened at the sight of Leona staging the photo. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "We've got her on multiple counts now. Animal cruelty, filing false reports, evidence tampering." "But we have to move carefully," Laurel reminded him. "She still has influence with Burton Malloy. If she realizes we have this—" "Agreed." Calder pulled out his phone. "I'm calling in some favors. We need to get this footage secured and authenticated before we make our move." Laurel stared down at the screen, where the frozen image showed Leona's calculated manipulation of the scene. All those weeks of pain and separation, of being branded an unfit mother, all because of one woman's desperate attempt to cover her tracks. "We'll make this right," Calder promised, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "The truth's finally coming to light." Laurel nodded, clinging to that touch like an anchor. The truth was there, captured in cold, digital clarity. Now they just had to make sure it reached the right eyes before Leona could bury it forever. The night air felt electric with tension as Laurel crouched in the shadows near the kennel office. Her instincts had warned her that Leona wouldn't wait long after discovering the missing footage. Sure enough, at 11:35 p.m., headlights swept across the parking lot. Laurel's heart hammered as she watched Leona slip through the side door, not bothering to turn on the main lights. Through the windows, she could see the beam of a flashlight moving toward the records room. It was now or never. taking a deep breath, Laurel used her old key card, the one she'd never returned, to enter through the grooming area. The familiar smell of dogs and disinfectant filled her nose as she moved silently through the darkness. She knew every squeaky floorboard, every blind corner from her years of night shifts. She found Leona in the filing room, frantically stuffing papers into a shredder. The manager jumped when Laurel flipped on the lights. "It's over, Leona," Laurel said, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I have the footage, everything, the illegal antibiotics, you staging that photo, all of it." Leona's perfectly maintained facade cracked. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Get out before I call security." "Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to see what's on this." Laurel held up a flash drive. "The truth about what really happened that night." "You stupid little kennel cleaner." Leona's voice dripped with contempt. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I built this place into what it is. Burton trusts me completely." She yanked another stack of files from the cabinet, but her designer sleeve caught on an exposed wire. There was a sharp crack and the smell of burning plastic. Both women turned to see sparks shooting from the overloaded shredder. "No!" Leona lunged for the machine, but it was too late. Flames licked up the scattered papers, catching the wooden shelving. The fire alarm shrieked to life as smoke began filling the small room. Laurel's training kicked in. "We need to get the dogs out!" She ran for the kennel area, but Leona grabbed her arm. "Forget them! The contracts, the breeding records, I have to destroy everything!" Laurel wrenched free. "They'll die!" She could already hear the panic barking from the main kennel room. The smoke was thickening, making her eyes water. She sprinted down the corridor, grabbing the emergency key ring from its hook. The fire was spreading faster than she'd imagined possible, feeding on decades of paperwork and dry wooden cabinets. She had to get to the whelping room first. Those puppies wouldn't stand a chance if the smoke reached them. Her hands shook as she unlocked the isolation ward. 3 shepherd pups, her mother's precious bloodline, huddled together in their pen. She scooped them into a transport crate, checking their breathing. They were scared, but alert. A crash from the records room made her jump. Through the haze, she saw Leona stumbling toward the exit, clutching a stack of files. The woman didn't even glance at the kennels as she fled. The smoke was getting worse. Laurel's lungs burned as she worked her way down the rows, opening gates and guiding terrified dogs toward the emergency exits. Years of disaster drills had prepared them. They knew to head for the outdoor runs, but the heat was building, and she could hear ominous creaking from above. She reached the last row just as something exploded in the records room, probably cleaning supplies or the backup generator. The blast knocked her against the wall. For a moment, her vision swam, but the frightened whimper from the kennel beside her brought her back to focus. An elderly golden retriever cowered in the corner, too arthritic to stand. Laurel didn't hesitate. She crawled into the kennel and gathered the dog in her arms, staggering toward the nearest exit. The smoke was so thick now she could barely see. Her legs trembled with effort as she carried the golden across the training yard to safety. Other dogs milled around in the outdoor runs, watching the growing flames with wide eyes. Laurel did a quick count. Everyone was accounted for, including the 3 shepherd pups, still secure in their crate. Sirens wailed in the distance as she sank to her knees, coughing. The fire had engulfed most of the administrative wing now, but the kennel areas were safe. She'd managed to save both the animals and the evidence that would clear her name. The flash drive felt warm in her pocket. A small thing to risk so much for, but it contained the truth that would bring her son back to her. Red and blue lights flooded the parking lot as fire trucks arrived. Through streaming eyes, Laurel saw Leona being questioned by police, still clutching her armful of partially burned files. The manager's perfect composure had crumbled, replaced by something desperate and ugly. Laurel hugged the shepherd puppies close, breathing in their sweet puppy smell beneath the smoke. These little ones were all she had left of her mother's legacy. She'd protected them twice now, first from the cold, then from the fire. No one would ever again twist that protection into something shameful. The smoke was getting thicker, making Laurel's eyes burn as she tried to find her way back through the corridor. She had to get that DVR to safety. It held the proof that would reunite her with Thayer. But something was wrong. The emergency exit door wouldn't budge. "Looking for a way out?" Leona's voice came from behind her. The manager stood at the other end of the hallway, a metal gas can dangling from her manicured fingers. "I can't let you ruin everything I've built." Laurel clutched the DVR tighter against her chest. "The police will find out what you did. You can't hide the truth forever." "Oh, but I can." Leona's smile was cold as she splashed gasoline across the floor and shelves. Such a tragic accident. All those important records lost. And the troublemaking kennel girl who just couldn't be saved in time. The first match hit the floor with a whoosh. Flames raced along the gasoline trail as Leona backed away, slamming and locking the storage bay door behind her. Laurel's heart pounded as she searched frantically for another exit, but the windows were barred, and the smoke was getting worse by the second. She pulled her shirt over her nose, trying to filter the toxic fumes. The heat was becoming unbearable. She stumbled toward the door, pounding with her free hand. "Help! Somebody help!" But her voice came out as a weak croak, her lungs already burning from the smoke. The room was spinning now. Laurel slid down, against the wall, still protecting the precious DVR. She thought of Thayer's sweet face, his tiny fingers curling around hers. She couldn't give up, not when she was so close to getting him back. Through the crackling flames, she heard something. A familiar voice calling her name. Then the sound of splintering wood. "Laurel, hold on!" It was Calder's voice, rough with urgency. The door shuddered under heavy blows. Laurel tried to call out but could only manage a weak cough. Dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. With a final crash, the door gave way. Through the smoke, she saw Calder's broad shoulders, his face set with determination as he fought his way through the flames to reach her. "I've got you," he said, scooping her up in his strong arms. "Stay with me, Laurel." She clutched the DVR tighter as he carried her through the inferno. The heat was incredible, but Calder didn't hesitate. He charged through burning debris, shielding her with his body until they burst out into the cool night air. Laurel gasped, sweet oxygen flooding her lungs as Calder set her gently on the grass. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer by the second. "The evidence," she wheezed, holding up the DVR with trembling hands. "We saved it." Calder's face was streaked with soot, but his eyes were bright with relief, and something more, pride, maybe, or admiration. "You saved it. You never gave up." Red and blue lights flooded the parking lot as fire trucks and police cars arrived. Through watering eyes, Laurel saw Leona being confronted by officers, her perfect facade crumbling as they snapped handcuffs around her wrists. The manager's face was twisted with fury as she watched her carefully constructed lies go up in flames along with the kennel. The DVR felt warm against Laurel's chest, not from the fire, but from hope. This small piece of technology held the key to her redemption, to getting Thayer back where he belonged. She'd protected it through smoke and flame, just as she'd protected her son that cold night with the puppies. Paramedics rushed over with oxygen masks and blankets, but Laurel refused to let go of the DVR until Calder gently squeezed her shoulder. "It's safe now," he said softly. "You're both safe. Let them help you." As she finally relaxed her grip, Laurel watched the flames climb higher into the night sky. The kennel, her workplace, her home for so many years, was being consumed. But unlike Leona's lies, the truth had survived the fire, protected by a mother's desperate love and unshakable determination. Laurel gripped the folder containing Dr. Del Rio's signed affidavit and Emmett's breeding contract as their truck sped down the rain-slicked highway. Calder's hands were steady on the wheel, his deputy's badge catching the morning light. In the back seat, Dr. Del Rio clutched her medical bag, her face tight with worry. "The brokers' meeting is set for 10 o'clock at the old fairgrounds," Calder said, checking his watch. "We've got 20 minutes. "Those puppies are protected by my mother's breeding clause," Laurel said, her voice firm. "Leona has no right to sell them overseas." Through the windshield, they spotted Burton Malloy's imposing figure at the fairground gates. The elderly owner stood beside his luxury car, looking troubled as they pulled up. "Mr. Malloy," Laurel called out, "please, you need to see this evidence." Burton adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents with growing dismay. His shoulders sagged as the truth sank in. "I should have paid closer attention," he admitted. "Go on through. Stop her before she ruins everything we've built here." The gates creaked open, and their truck surged forward. Ahead, they could see Leona's silver SUV parked near the livestock pavilion. "There she is," Dr. Del Rio pointed. "And those carrying cases, the puppies must be inside." Calder's truck roared down the dark county road, its headlights cutting through the freezing mist. Ahead, the transport van weaved dangerously on the slick pavement. "She's heading for the state line," Calder said grimly. "If she crosses it—" "Not happening." Laurel gripped the dashboard as they gained on the van. Ice crystals glittered on the windshield, beautiful but deadly. Suddenly, the van swerved violently. Its tires hit a patch of black ice, sending it into a wild spin. Laurel's heart leaped into her throat as the vehicle careened off the road and slammed into a snowbank. They skidded to a stop. Laurel was out before Calder could warn her about the ice. She could hear frightened whimpers from inside the overturned van. "Stay where you are!" Leona emerged from the driver's side, stumbling but defiant. Calder approached with his badge visible. "It's over, Leona. We have the evidence." While he dealt with Leona, Laurel rushed to the back of the van. One crate had cracked open, a small pup trapped inside. With trembling fingers, she worked to free the frightened animal. "Easy, little one," she whispered, finally pulling the pup free. It snuggled against her chest, shivering. Calder had Leona in handcuffs when Dr. Del Rio's car pulled up. Together they secured the remaining puppies and gathered the scattered documentation that had spilled during the crash. "We've got everything," Calder confirmed, leading a sullen Leona to his truck. "The dash cam caught it all, the reckless driving, the attempted flight. It's done." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Leona faced multiple charges: animal cruelty, fraud, and attempted destruction of evidence. The security footage from that stormy night, combined with Dr. Del Rio's testimony and the breeding records, painted an undeniable picture of her deception. In a small courthouse filled with morning light, Laurel held back tears as Child Protective Services officially reversed their decision. The judge's words rang clear. "In light of the evidence, we find Ms. Finch acted with commendable judgment during extraordinary circumstances." Thayer, now back in her arms, grabbed at her hair and giggled. He'd grown so much in their weeks apart, but his gray eyes still held that same sparkle. Burton Malloy, shaken by how close he'd come to legal trouble himself, approached Laurel after the hearing. "I was blind to what was happening," he admitted, tugging at his silk tie. "Let me make it right. I want you to run a new program at the kennels, complete oversight, proper veterinary care, everything done by the book." Calder stood beside her as she considered the offer. his steady presence a reminder of how much had changed. He'd been there through every step, gathering evidence, late-night strategy sessions, and quiet moments when despair threatened to overwhelm her. "We'll help you set it up right," he said softly, and the word "we" made her heart flutter. Laurel looked down at Thayer, then over at the 3 shepherd pups who would stay in her care, her mother's legacy preserved after all. "Yes," she said finally, "we'll build something good this time." Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.